Hello from Sojourn Psychology. It is Tara Boothby. Today I'm going to talk about blame. It's been a while since I've talked about blame on here. We have a few other videos about shame, blame, humiliation. But I've just been thinking about blame, responsibility, accountability, meaning making, behavioral change. Blame is such an interesting motivator, as a source for healing, and it's also a major pitfall. It's a sneaky one too, like shame, right? So actually recently a client called blame a blame spiral, which I thought was cool language. We often talk about a shame spiral, but what might be a blame spiral, and what are some of the nuances of blame? So blame, the risks fall typically into two categories. When we're blaming, we usually land in our view of self and our view of others, one or the other, or both. So blaming ourself or blaming another person. From an emotionally focused point of view, we might call this who's the bad guy. That is some of the language that we'll use. Or sometimes we call it like tit for tat. Who's more at fault? Who is the scapegoat? Which is the person that is going to fall on the sword? Who shall we burn at the stake? It becomes a bit of a witch hunt, truthfully, when we really require one person to be the fault sayer. Can I say that? The person who has done the most damage. And now let's be honest, there are times where I've done more damage than somebody else, or somebody else has done more damage than I have. And it is really normal in my own experience, as well as the experience of people I come alongside of, that our brain tries to make sense of what has gone on, who's done what, when, where, why, and how. And in some schools of thought, and I personally believe this is a very helpful tool in matters of hurt, in matters of crisis, turmoil, change, heightened emotion, when we're trying to self-regulate or co-regulate, when we're trying to figure out what has happened. A great question is, who owns the problem? So what part of this problem is mine and what part of this problem is somebody else's? But it still runs the risk that we can fall into this blame spiral, the pitfall. We don't want to fall into a pitfall of blame. Blame is not a neural pathway that we want to have embedded and strongly accessed in our brain. So who owns the problem is great when we're honoring that question within a place of self-love, love of others, and I'll even say a belief in a loving God, because that's the word that I use for the mystery. But more to the psychology of it, even if we're navigating who owns the problem through the lens of accountability, love of self, and love of others, it really, really is a helpful self-reflection. It's a helpful way to process, honoring the missteps that have occurred. Because if I'm blaming myself, I'm taking on not only my responsibility, but the responsibility of others. And if I'm blaming others, I am casting not only their responsibility, but my responsibility. If I put too much focus, if I over focus on myself as the problem, I am not accountable. If I put too much focus, if I over focus on the other person, I am not being accountable. And if I'm not being accountable, I'm not being held accountable. If I am not able to be accountable to myself and to hold myself accountable to what I've done wrong and what I have not done wrong, then I look over and I'm unable, and this sounds harsh, but I'm unable to hold someone else accountable. So often when we talk about being held accountable, we've had some sort of negative experience where it's been lorded over us. That language is often misused within a blame spiral. I'm just holding you accountable. I mean, be leery of the one that says that. How do we talk about accountability? Or is it just a felt sense? It's a beautiful, beautiful space to be in relationship with other people, but it's one of those ways of being that is really delicate to talk about. The word accountability is very delicate. And blame. So this was the other thing. Oh, I love it when I write notes. Accountable. Um, is I think it's also this process of when I'm trying to navigate better through the eyes of love for self and love for others. And I want to sense into this space of accountability to self and accountability to others. It is an embodying experience. So when I wonder on the corrective epiphany of honoring who owns the problem, I got to this place where, again, emotionally focused lens, it really is something about embodying our experience. When we live within an embodied experience, we can better navigate our view of self and our view of others and our view of God. So often when we live in a fractured relationship, when we have a fractured experience, we're in pain, maybe we're in fight, flight, freeze, fawn, we're agitated. Those are the times when we actually disembody. We're not really stepping into our feelings. We're not considering, how do I feel about this and what meaning do I make of it? There's another little tool. How do I feel? What meaning do I make of that? But I also consider that there is a place inside of us where the conversation about who owns the problem can live. And I wonder if that's a place of my source of peace was the first language that came up for me. If I'm in my source of peace, the place where peace resides in me, I think that's more of a core thing for me. When I think of my peace, it expands from my gut to my heart. There's a space where peace can live. And in that place, if I'm having a conversation with myself, first is what I generally would do, and then with another, that I'm checking in with my source of peace. How does my peaceful place inside feel as I consider who owns the problem? The other question or space I was considering was, where is my intuition? And so for me, there's some sense of, intuition around here, a little bit up here. Interesting when we get checking into our bodies and consider where our feelings reside, where our positive intentionality reside. So I guess if for you as well to navigate, what emotions, what ways of being do I want to drive me as I lean into efforts of repair rather than falling into the shame spiral? For me, the places that I want to lean into is my intuition and my peace. And I think my first place is coming from a core of peace. And my evaluation is the lens, the mind, and the voice of intuition. That's where I land when I'm considering how to better lean into who owns the problem, which again, I just think is a beautiful process analysis for when something goes bad. Because when things go bad, that's when we run the risk of the blame game. Take care, you guys. I hope you're enjoying the final few weeks of summer before we hit solstice and it's back to school. So hopefully that's working out good for you.